What's happening? Cory Wong here with the Wong Notes podcast, episode 4 with Eric Johnson. Now, I want to start this episode a little bit different than I've done the others with a challenge. I'm not going to do a weekly challenge. Maybe I will at some point. But today, I just want you to think about this one thing as far as a phrasing picking thing. I want you to practice your 3-note per string major scales, up and down. If you're not familiar with these, just look them up online. I'm sure Premier Guitar's got some sort of lesson online somewhere with them. There's some YouTube guy who's got it. Paul Gilbert, he's the guy that got me hip to it off one of his Hot Licks videos or something like that. Now, typically when people practice this, they go down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, alternate picking. Or they'll do some sort of sweeping thing on the way down where they go down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, whatever. And then on their way back up the strings, they go up, down, up, up, down, up, up, down, up, up, down, up. What I want you to try this week is go down, up, hammer on when you're going up the scale, and down, up, pull off when you're going back. What it's going to do is it's going to create a different type of phrasing, and it might implement some sort of change into the way that you phrase your soloing or your melodies to create a new and cool, different sound to your playing that might just bring a new, fresh take. Not because other people are sick of what you're playing, but sometimes as a guitar player, we get sick of our own playing. Check it out, try it out, see what you think. Okay, if you're listening to a guitar podcast, you probably know who Eric Johnson is. The person in the car next to you or in the office next to you probably knows who Eric Johnson is, even if they don't know who Eric Johnson is. He's one of those cats who ended up in the zeitgeist due to a hit song, Cliffs of Dover. Now, that's a straight up hit song. He won a Grammy for it. Many of us played that song on Rock Band when we were kids. That's why the person in the office next to you knows who he is. If you're like, hey, you know who Eric Johnson is? They're like, Eric Johnson. And you're like, oh, yeah, I know Eric Johnson. That dude's dope. We all know who Eric Johnson is. I'm stoked to have him on the show today. Man, he can write some really hooky guitar lines. And he's been able to make hook after hook that are very guitaristic, that are also just very approachable and listenable for the average listener. I love it. It's a riddle I'm always trying to solve with my own playing. So let's sit back, enjoy some wisdom from guitar hero Eric Johnson. All right, a lot of people ask me what I use on the road for backline gear when I show up at a festival, when I show up at a gig in another country or something, and I haven't been able to fly with all my gear. Basically, what I ask for is any Fender Stratocaster made in the last 10 years to be there for me to use as a backup. I normally travel with my guitar, but I always ask for a backup Strat, just in case. And I also say pretty much any Fender tube amp is good to go. My preference is a Super Reverb. It's got 4 10-inch speakers, which respond a little bit differently than 12-inch speakers. Otherwise, I'll ask for a Fender Twin Reverb, which has a little more oomph in the low end, but the tighter low end of the 410s sometimes is nice for that spanky funk thing. Also, Fender Deluxe, it's great. Hot Rod Deluxe, those are awesome too. Basically, I've trusted Fender tube amps with any situation, with Wolfpack or Fearless Flyers, or when I'm touring on my own. We just ask for Fender tube amps, and they've always been really great. And, you know, sometimes people are into the vintage thing. That's awesome. I dig vintage instruments. I dig vintage gear. But I have found there is a little more consistency in the newer stuff as far as just like, is it going to work really well? Is there some weird noise? Is there some weird buzz? Look, don't come at me. If you like vintage gear, great. Vintage gear is dope. But I'm going off my own experience. So I would suggest go out, check out some Fender amps, check out some Fender tube amps. I also have this I've been trying to do an A/B test on this Fender Twin Tone Master. When I play clean, I've sent recordings of the Tone Master versus my regular Twin. A lot of people can't tell the difference. So check it out for yourself. See what you think. Eric, thanks so much for being with us today. This is really fun to talk with you. I have been a fan and listened to your music for years, and it is fun to finally sit down and talk with you about music and about guitar.
Well, thanks, Cory. I'm glad to be here, man.
You have had a long career as a guitar player and as an artist. You are known as one of the guitar gods by all the guitar magazines and whatnots. And usually with that means that there's an insane level of technical proficiency, which you have. But there's something that I noticed about your playing where you don't rely on that? It seems as if you have a higher understanding of music as a whole, when to bust out the chops, when to just play something melodic, or even just when to leave some space. Can you speak into that a little bit?
Well, I think that's an interesting point, and I guess we all go through different periods where we're learning and we want to show what we've learned, and it's great fun to just blow up on guitar and just play and play and play, and you hit these moments that are just really beautiful and really worthwhile and valid. If you're telling somebody you love them or will you be my friend, you could spend 2 seconds saying it, or you can spend 20 minutes saying it over and over and over, and you kind of dilute it, or you take away some of the impact of just being succinct about it. And I've watched YouTube videos of myself where I'm going off on a 18-minute lead break, and there's parts I go, wow, that's really great, and then it's like, okay, this is getting, okay, it's time to wrap it up here, So life's a journey and a lesson learned, and I'm just trying to learn to see the beautiful validity in trying to learn to become a really good player on your instrument, but learn the real elevating parameters of that. There's ways for it to elevate by saying it in a clear way, and I've learned just from my own overdoings that, you can go too far. And then it's also kind of a mindset, it's like, what do you want to say at the end of the day with your song or your music? And I think the sky's the limit. So if I stop broadcasting and talking and being all kinetic, and I just like try to listen to whatever the, intuitive message happening, it might say, well, why don't you try this song or this part? And it's going to be more elevated. So yeah, you can still play guitar, but, don't just rush off and talk all the time, when there might be a message coming to you that might make it a little more elevated,
I love that. That's understanding when to use the power that you have. There's a certain meekness and power to understanding when and where.
That's well said. And it's so true. And you think, one of my favorite, I love all the Jimi Hendrix records, but there's something about Axis Bold as Love I really love. And it's a song record. It's 80% rhythm guitar. Yeah. And there's little spurts of lead guitar. But if you really look at it, brass tack, face value, it's not him blowing up for 5 million years. And it's such a deep song music record that you can put all these gems within the vehicle as long as you have a vehicle that's going somewhere worthwhile. And that's a subjective thing, and people have different tastes. So it's really just what you want to try to do. But the people I learned from that I can't hold a candle to, Stevie Wonder stuff from the 70s and the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix. And you could tell they had a serious agenda, for lack of a better word, to just create music. And they said, by the way, I'm going to create this music. I'm going to put this really cool guitar part in, or Ringo's going to put this really cool guitar. But it was all sublimated with this greater purpose, I
actually, now that I think about it, there's so much material where you're known as a lead guy, and your lead chops, your tone, your sound, your touch, your choices make you who you are on that thing, and you're very well known for that. But your rhythm playing is really great. And actually, a lot of my favorite playing of yours is some of the stuff where it's like you're playing the song. Well,
I'm still trying to work on my feel in my pocket. I have a tendency to rush sometimes when I play with a band. I'm like, so I don't know. I definitely am not James Brown with the guitar as far as, pocket, but I'm trying to get that better. But I think, to your point, I think maybe some of my chord voicings or, that kind of thing. It's interesting. I'll play a whole set, 90 minutes, and I'll, try to do all this fancy stuff and And at the end of the night, I have more people coming to me go, my favorite part of the evening was that 2 minutes before Cliffs of Dover where you just played some clean chords and did all those things. And I said, that's interesting, because repetitively, that's what people, I think when you go past that barricade of I'm impressed with what you're doing, and you talk about what has an impact on somebody as they're sitting there listening, then you get into a whole nother arena of music or sounds.
Yeah, and I seem to find for myself, I'm a guitar player. I love the guitar. But a lot of times when I'm watching a guitar show, that rings true for me as well. I love seeing the really impressive guitar stuff. And it's like, whoa, that's cool. But the place that I find myself having a very visceral response is the stuff where it's not look at this amazing thing, this Olympic guitar stuff. It's more like, yeah, it's something that actually is connecting on a deeper musical level. Not to say that lead things can't, but typically it's something that has a little more vulnerability to it. I don't know.
No, that's totally it. Vulnerability, being more honest, showing your inner being. That's something I've noticed in my music over the years. I would have liked to have showed more of my inner being. So, sometimes you can hide that a little bit and just create this really perfect statue and go, that is so perfect, but you're not really sharing like you say, a vulnerability place. That is so key and paramount in any kind of art, really. And it's something we have to simulate in ourselves. You go, oh, I get it. You can't just say, well, that's important. You got to be vulnerable. It's like, oh no, I feel that in my, and that's kind of what I'm trying to arrive at now. And the last record I did, to me, it was a step in the right direction because I was thinking about that all the time. I wasn't just having that on the back burner, thinking about, okay, how cool part can I play here? So, and I think, another thing to your point that kind of makes it even more of a challenge is, you think about electric guitar and playing rock and roll licks. I mean, it's been done for 60 years. So you can hardly expect somebody to go, oh my God, what was that lick you did? It's like they've heard it for 60 years. And everybody's like, okay, what else you got?
Well, and the thing that I find too is that people have heard interesting guitar things forever. I mean, not forever, for the last how many decades, but what they haven't heard is you. And the more that you inject who you are, it seems to be that there's more compelling art and there's a deeper human connection where the instrument and the music is a vehicle of creative expression of self.
And what you just said, Cory, is what something B.B. King said to me years ago when I was on tour with him. He said almost exactly what you said. He said, you can play this, you can play that, you can get really good at that, but you got to share that thing inside you that's unique to the world. You got to find that spark. And I remember when he told me that, I kind of understood it, but it took me a few years to really, all of a sudden I finally got it. I was like, oh, I get it. It's about sharing that more of that inner truth that you have. And that, like you say, that'll always be fresh and unique.
Yeah. Who is that for you today? And how is that different than what was your first record? 1986?
Yeah, it sure was. Tones. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So how is who you are and what your voice is today, how is that different? And what was that journey to get to where you are now?
I think I was intoxicated with just playing guitar and like finding all those different rounds of that and having fun with that and just, okay, here's a song I can write that'll show the guitar. And now I think what I'm trying to get to is, I got this song and that's the important part. And now how can I put some interesting guitar in it? So it's kind of an inversion process. I'm really committed to playing the guitar. I don't think I ever bought into, okay, I'm just going to play G chords and the heck with it. First off, there's plenty of people that can write more awesome songs than I do. It's like, oh, I'm going to be a songwriter and sit and, it's like, well, okay, you're going to join 5 other million people that are really good at it. But so, I've always been committed and will stay committed to pushing the boundaries of guitar. I want to, because it turns me on. It's like, wow, this is, it's fun for me. I think that the key issue is, well, how can I do that in a way that'll be revelatory and purposeful for the song, and also somehow try to find something a little fresh or a different slant to where it's interesting and ear catching to do. So it's really trying to create a balance and find something in a way to kind of do the both worlds.
Yeah, I love that. It doesn't seem like we've had a guitar god ascend in the last few years. Like there's a handful of guys, but it doesn't seem like the same influx as the 80s and 90s. And partially maybe guitar virtuosity is not as celebrated as it was. But on the other hand, you have a whole generation of Instagram guitar players, and there's internet guitar players, and there's so much stuff that there is a lot of guitar players that are celebrated because they can do incredible feats on the instrument, Olympic level things. But nowadays, a lot of the most highly concentrated place that people are absorbing that is Instagram and YouTube and things like that. But it's connecting in a different way. Are you aware of what's happening on that? And what's your do you have any advice for those that are kind of in that realm now, that want to discover more of who they are on the instrument, want to discover more of how to be a better ambassador for the guitar?
Well, I think first and foremost, when you write a song that really hits people, it's like, oh, that you want to hear it again, or it really does something. It widens you, or makes you feel better, or lifts you somewhere. That's first and foremost. Just experimenting with the guitar and just seeing where you can come up with something fresh. I think it's not necessary, but I think contributing something that's a little bit different, whether it's super technical or not. I don't think it's all been said or done on the guitar, but it's been around so long. It's been rehashed so much with the same thing over and over and over and over. It's like if you eat 5,000 candy bars, it's like, hey, you want a candy bar? It's like, well, not really, It's not understandable, and so it would behoove everybody, the listener and the player, to just try to let the moment come to them inspirationally, instead of me talking all the time. Let me be silent and let the moment come to me. Oh, well, let's try that or do this, because there's an ocean out there that I think is pretty limitless. Whether the guitar will have this iconic exaltation that it did in the 80s and 90s ever again, I don't know. I mean, the saxophone had that in the 40s and 50s, so maybe it's just one of those things. But I think there's plenty of room for somebody to do something inventive and interesting. And I think when somebody's really, honest with what they're really feeling inside, it comes all across, But it, like you say, I mean, the guitar is waned in its revered status, but at the same time, they're selling more guitars than ever, because everybody at home is just buying guitars. It's just fun. So it's almost like it's returned back to home plate, where it's just, I'm just doing this because it's fun. Same thing we did when we were 17. We'll learn a couple chords. Oh, listen to that. It's great. Just having fun. It's taking all the pressure and all the pretense out of it, which really, no matter what you're doing, whether you're doing it for a living or doing it for fun, none of that stuff helps anyhow. If you watch the arc of anybody's career, it's like the more they become aware of themselves, the more successful, and the more they are adorned with all this jewelry that starts choking them, because they've become what they are, and they're their legacy, and they're living in their own bubble of what they are. And it also translates to their guitar playing. Oh, this is my legacy. I play these licks and I have this sound. And all of a sudden you've cemented yourself instead of staying liquid.
Ooh. So with that being said, how does somebody find their voice on the instrument? If somebody's been, like, a lot of people that are listening to this are going to be college age people learning to play guitar, or finally solidifying their guitar stuff. Some people are teenagers just getting the guitar for the first time, kind of figuring out how to play songs. A lot of people listening are professional guitar players themselves in varying degrees. So some universal principles of how do you find your voice?
Well, I think it's, first off, you find where your passion is, and if it's playing Joan Baez folk chords and just singing, then beautiful, and just try to develop that. If it's playing Ishtok Perlman type licks, that's beautiful too. But I think you got to find your passion. And you can't just decide in your mind, well, somebody said this is a cool thing to do, so I got to do it. You'll get bored. So you got to find your passion. Once you find your passion, then you listen to your heroes, the people you really love, and then I think you're honest with yourself. You listen to yourself, or you record yourself, listen to yourself, and you have to be honest with yourself if you want to try to really make headway with your playing. I remember first time I'd hear Hendrix with the fuzz, like a Love or Confusion, or I'd hear Jeff Beck on New York City Blues, or the Nazar Blue, or Happening 10 Years Time Ago, or I'd hear two notes of Wes Montgomery, and I go, man, that sounds so great. And it's played. That gives me that passion. When at that end, I had to start working on my own tone and go, I'm not getting it. It's not quite like that. And I just keep working on it until it would really be close to my heroes.
Sure.
And everybody copies somebody. I don't think there's anything wrong with copying people. You take from everybody you love and you create your own recipe. If I took the 10 guitar players that I like, that really hit me the most, and then I put them all together and I make my own sound, and then everybody goes, oh, Eric has his original sound, but really, if you were to break it down, it's a combination of all the people that I love.
Yeah.
And I had to be honest with myself as I worked on that. No, that's not quite it. you can't get 30% there and go, yeah, I'm just really nailing it. I sound just like Wes Montgomery, you know?
When do you feel like you found your voice? When do you feel like you got your sound on the instrument or as an artist?
Well, I think it was a gradual thing. If I had to look at it in different chapters, I would say initially when I was like 15 or 16, I was copying Eric Clapton to the note. So much that people would come hear me play and they just go, God, all he's doing is copying Eric Clapton. You know, I'd be copying Spoonful but it was a very good learning experience because that tone Clapton was using then was extremely beautiful in his playing. I was learning so much by just copying him to a T.
Yeah.
Later on, I got in a jazz rock group, fusion group, Electromagnus. I got really into Bill Connors and John McLaughlin. So I started like playing those licks, but with like an Eric Clapton type tone. You know what I mean? It was kind of like this morphing thing. And then I got into trying to write songs. So I had to figure out a way to put that in songs. And then I started studying chord voicings, which opened that up and kind of changed. So it was really kind of a process, you know, but the process starts with, I think the process starts with, there's nothing wrong with copying somebody and them being your mentor. You know, you just kind of really study what they do. You got to get into the ABCs and the ins and outs of what they do because that's how you learn.
Yeah. I've been trying to figure out a certain riddle on the guitar. As a guitar-led band, there seems to be a riddle out there that's, how do you keep things interesting if it's just guitar as the lead the majority of the time? A lot of times, like you mentioned Stevie Wonder. A lot of Stevie Wonder tunes, there's the musical hook and there's the vocal hooks. And there's so much, like you listen to Sir Duke and there's the instrumental hook lines, there's the vocal hook lines. There's so many different things and arrangement things to keep things interesting because there's different tones, different timbres, there's lyrics, there's that sort of thing. How do you keep things interesting when it's just a guitar tune? And so it's not just like, there's so much guitar.
Yeah, right. No, that's a great point. And I kind of like what you're saying. I keep battling. I need to get more effects and do this orchestrative symphonic guitar thing. And then there's this other side that says, no, I actually just want to like get rid of all the pedals and play straight in the amp. It's a paradox to me because sometimes when I'm playing straight in the amp, I'm having more fun. I feel it in my fingers more. There's more of a visceral connection with the sound. I think that it becomes a matter of music to keep it interesting on guitar. Say you don't use any effects, so you just got this guitar sound. You might have like a dirty tone, and then a clean tone. But then you have to play. You have to negotiate musical notes to make it interesting, rather than negotiating the effects to make it interesting. And they're two different schools. There's something really immediately connective about just negotiating the music. You know, to answer your question, I mean, coming up with interesting chord voicings and sounds. And then, you know, sometimes it's our intention of how we play, you know, like that intention can really shift the complexion of the music. Like you listen to like some of Jeff Beck's stuff and his intention, he has this kind of surly, almost just like 20% comical, 20% surly, you know, it's genius. But he has these kind of like, and it takes it in this place that nobody else goes to, you know?
Yeah.
He's one in a million. And so really it's that intention and the way you play. I think in a way there can be a lot of freedom and limitation. I mean, you hear like great acoustic players that are just playing the acoustic guitar and they somehow make it interesting. I think with electric guitar, it could be, but then, you know, also you could use effects. The thing with effects though, there's never enough, you know, you get 12 effects and then you've used them for 4 songs and go, okay, I've used those because they're kind of novelty, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well, I think it's a similar thing too, where like you listen to Keith Jarrett or Brad Meldau play solo piano and it draws a different thing than if they were playing a keyboard with endless sounds patches that they could scroll through. Now, one of the common denominators between all of the guitar players and musicians that I'm interviewing on this podcast is that they have a signature thing. And part of their signature thing is a signature sound. I want to encourage you guys to continue to explore your sound and some options. Check out that Ultra series from Fender. If you're not glued to a specific Strat or Tele or J-Bass or Jazzmaster or P-Bass, whatever, check them out. They are making some dope instruments right now. Fender's making some really great stuff. Eric's going to talk about his signature stuff coming up and what that means for an artist's sound. As one of like the tone guys out there, you hear your sound, you know it's you. You've got a signature sound, you've got a signature thing. What's interesting to me about your sound on the instrument is that it is kind of remained, it's basically remained timeless through decades, where there's a lot of guitar players whose tones from the 80s and 90s, you hear it and it sounds like that era. It sounds like that thing. When I listen to your records, it seems to be more consistent throughout, and somehow it just holds up better than a lot of other guitar players from that era. What do you attribute that to?
I guess all I can say is that I try to go for just a flat EQ guitar tone, just how it sounds. You know, it's like if you had a great violin and then you ran it through a bunch of EQ, it's like, well, no, not really. I mean, the violin is okay the way it is. Let's just figure out a way to capture the way that sounds. And you know, it's different thing for different people. You know, that's just what I like to do. So what I mean by that is that's why I prefer to use old amplifiers. It's not that I'm a stickler for old amps. It's just the truth is they're incredibly simple. They're straight ahead. They have the preamp tubes, the power tubes, and the wiring is incredibly simple. What happens from that is you basically get just the natural sound of the guitar. And then if you turn it up, you get a little bit more of a pure, natural, even harmonic distortion. I like that sound. I grew up on that. It's really like the early Freddie King and B.B. King records. And then later, Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck. It's just the real simple, straight ahead guitar tone, and whether you have it clean or distorted. So I like that. I personally like that more. I mean, I'll use like a processed sound, like a backing track in the studio, but I wouldn't be happy having my four-funnel sound be like this processed sound. I don't think I would have played guitar if that would have been the only thing I could have used on guitar. I go, you know what? I think I'll play piano or something, and that's just because I grew up on that sound. I grew up on that 60s sound. And to me, that was before all the bells and whistles to, oh no, we can turn the guitar into sounding like this, or we can change this, or we can EQ it to this and that. And it's like, but there's something beautiful about that just an original expression, that home plate of just natural sound, Yeah. So what I gravitate towards.
Yeah. Well, it's the year 2020. We're all trying things, and there's a lot of great modeling gear and great direct options out there. Do you ever explore those? Have you explored there? Are there any that inspire you when you plug into them?
It's interesting. I use some of them in the studio for backing tracks. I think the modeling thing, and it's probably gonna, it'll probably end up getting there. My experience with it is it's a little two-dimensional. You can spend a lot of time, you can dial in a sound. It's like, wow, that works. I think that works. The moment I start playing with people or playing on recordings, it doesn't seem to sit in the music correctly to me. It seems to be kind of like, it's almost like that's just me. It's like you got a crowd of people and everybody's talking and somebody wheels in a mannequin. They were next door with the mannequin, go, oh, it looks great. Looks like a person. I mean, there's no problem. And it's on like this dolly with wheels. And they wheel it into this crowd of people. And everybody's like turns and stops and goes, well, I don't think it's one of us. I mean, that's just me though. And I think and you know what? It depends on the application of the music. I think maybe in certain music, it probably works great.
Yeah, I was totally curious. Okay, I have a question. I heard a story. I'm from Minneapolis. I grew up around the Prince camp, and I cut my teeth learning from a lot of the Prince cats. And, I met him a handful of times, and he came out and saw me play. I heard a story that he discovered you. I heard a story that, he got you a deal with Warner or something. Is there any truth to that?
Well, I've been told that, and I've never met him. I was told that he maybe saw a TV show of mine and that he called Warner's and suggested that I was in the middle of Christopher Cross is the person that introduced me to Warner Brothers. And they spent a couple years doing demo tapes with me and having producers come in and before we did tones, and they were kind of on the fence about what to do with me. I heard from several people that he saw a TV show and he called Warner, said, "Hey, you should sign this guy." And then that kind of made him decide to go ahead and push the button. That's what I've heard, but I've never substantiated. I never met Prince, so I just I never say that it's definitely true, but that's what I heard. But I wish I'd met him. I mean, he was a real genius. But.
Speaking of Christopher Cross, is that album Minstrel Gigolo?
Yeah,
you played on that record.
I did.
Did you play on the whole record or just some of it, or that was your introduction to Warner? Was through that album?
Yeah, after that, as Chris did that record, and it did incredibly well, and he was with Warner Brothers, and he talked to him about coming out and seeing me, and I spent time just trying to build up my thing, playing clubs and stuff, and then they came out, and then we just started a relationship for a few years before they ultimately signed me. But it was Chris that introduced me to him.
What's interesting about that record, there's a couple tunes on there, or one in particular that I listened to, and I can tell that it's you, but it sounds to me, it's like, that's Eric Johnson. But you can tell it's in a place where you kind of got your thing figured out. But when I hear that, that's something where it's like, you've kind of got this nugget of a thing of your voice and who you are as an artist, and you're just finally discovering it. That's what I hear when I listen to that record. And then when you go to tones and then you're following records, it does feel like you get a more solid, you've mined the piece of gold to a more pure form from those records on.
Yeah. That was about the time I wasn't playing in the fusion band anymore, so I was trying to figure out how to write songs and stuff. So I guess I was trying to learn how to play melodies on guitar and stuff.
You have a lot of acoustic stuff out. A lot of people know you as a lead electric guy. You've also explored maybe an equal amount of acoustic stuff. Is that fair to say?
Maybe not quite as equal amount, but I've always listened to it and played it and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a tune that I listened to, Song for Irene. That one to me sounds like it has a lot of piano influence. It doesn't sound as much to me like this is a guitar player sitting down to play a guitar tune. Of course it is, because you're playing acoustic guitar. It's like a solo guitar tune or whatever. But it sounds to me like it's got a much more interesting approach where you're not just doing standard guitar guy stuff. And some of what you've already talked about is your choice in chord voicings, your choice in just trying to make a song. How do you approach writing solo acoustic music? If you were to sit down and if somebody asked you to write an acoustic solo guitar album, what's your plan A songwriting process?
Well, I think with me, I personally like finger picking guitar, so it would probably be more finger picking than strumming. And so I would try to figure out some kind of way where I had bass notes and chord things going on at the same time.
How does somebody find themselves in a place to be able to sound less like guitar stuff and more like just music? The piano is a very just musical instrument. It's a big foundational thing. The guitar can kind of mimic it, but what are some just basic techniques, tricks, tips, whatever? I think
that's really a great question. I think that's always kind of been. I started playing piano originally, so when I play guitar, I kind of relate to it like a piano. Mm-hmm. It's almost like my first language was piano, and so I've learned another language since then. But a lot of times, I try to extract certain advantages of the piano onto guitar, and of course you have to they have to be kind of edited a little bit, this is a great piano chord, I want to take this to guitar, and I might not be able to get the whole thing, but I'll edit it to try to get the best get the most to the same feel. So I like doing voicings off the piano, and then also if you're playing a piano part, you can figure out a way to finger pick like the piano. I don't know. I like that. I like that. And, oddly enough, steel guitar players, I love steel guitar. I love the way they bounce the notes off with their right hand. And it's actually become kind of a kind of guitar technique like Jerry Reed kind of started.
Sure.
And so I like that. But that's kind of like, strike the strings at the same time, and so it's kind of if I had to go to to the DNA of sometimes of the way I approach guitar. It's some of the steel guitar techniques and then taking piano concepts.
Cool. I love that. You've been on the road a lot. You've had a long-spanning career as a musician, as an artist. How do you stay healthy and strength of mind on the road? There's a lot of people listening that are just starting to go out on tour, starting to do even just more gigs around town wherever they live. What are some important things to just keeping a healthy mind on the road?
That's a great question. I have a friend that plays golf, and he says that 90% of the way you play golf is you keep your Zen attitude, you keep your focus, and you play much better. And he says that's it. He says it's so much more important than, oh no, I got to get the iron just right, grab it here, and it's 45. And then you just get like you're tripping over yourself. But so I think you got to keep a focus. The more you can keep a Zen focus on the road. I mean, for me, I don't do drugs or drink, so that helps. And really eating well is important, and sleeping well is important. I think that those are the most important things. And then, just taking care of yourself and getting exercise of some sort. And I think if you go on the road and you just really push yourself and rag yourself out and you stay up all night and there's a certain, if you're really young, you'll get away. I mean, I did some of that when I was really, really young. And I mean, you can get away with it a little bit, but as you get older, I don't think you really ever get away with it. And I think it's best to kind of get that Zen thing together. But at some point, the more you can articulate that Zen framework, the more it builds kind of an insulation around your body, mind, and soul, I think.
Yeah. I can attest to that for sure. I am a firm believer in 8 hours of sleep every night, eating healthy, not partying all the time. I have friends that party on the road that I'll see them do it. It's like, dude, what are you doing? Because then they'll show up and then they're dragging the next day, and then it affects the whole show. And honestly, it's not fair to the audience, and it's not fair to the fans, and it's not fair to the band as a whole. Fortunately, the band that I play with, all of us are, we eat clean and we're not big partiers. Nobody's involved in any drugs or anything. So it helps a lot when everybody kind of has the same vision.
Yeah, sure.
You've also done tours with a lot of other guitar players, and you've done like the Jimi Hendrix tour thing where you've got a bunch of other guitar players out. Buddy Guy, Satriani, Johnny Lang, Dweezil, Doyle Bramall. There's so many other guitar players out. Was Eric Gales, who's insane, incredible guitar player. So many incredible guitar players. When you have that many extreme forces of an instrument that all play the same instrument, how do you keep from ego getting in the way of the performance?
Interesting, on the Hendrix tour, there's just little or none of that. I never really felt that. Everybody was just having fun playing. But, in all honesty, I think, there is a little bit of ego in it when you come out, if you're just being aware of yourself and thinking, I got to be good, and maybe they'll like this lick. That's still coming from that same place. It's not a type of real, potent, well, I'm going to show him, it's not that. There was never any of that I never felt any of that on the Hendrix tour. But I know that when I go on stage sometimes, I'm like, I got to really do well. I got to really impress everybody. And here comes this part. They'll, and I'm just being honest, and maybe I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit it. I wish I could come on stage and be totally like completely oblivious to myself, like in this place where you're like, oh, you know what, tonight I'm in touch with this musical thing and it's telling me to just play a G chord for 20 minutes, have that kind of security, to have that kind of trust in what's happening, to where you can remove yourself from like tripping over the whole thing, and that's, you have to have enough ego to get out of bed, or you never even get out of bed. You know what I mean? It's like, I think there's a place where I'd like to get rid of all that, to where I can go back to just being like, not childish, but childlike, where you're just like, wow, none of this matters. I don't have to prove anything. I just want to be in the moment. And then, the times I've ever slipped into that zone is when I've absolutely played my best. I mean, no question about it. So The interesting thing is that it's a win-win. I mean, that's where the really beautiful fruit is, I think, being there. So, but I never felt any of that. I mean, even some, the other things I did. I think, it never had like a negative kind of edge to it or anything. I don't think.
Do you play on other people's albums? Do you do much session work?
I haven't real recently, but yeah, from time to time. I just did a track on Doyle Dykes' new record.
Do you do a lot of your work from home? Like you're in a home studio right now, which looks amazing. I can see it behind you. But do you engineer your own sessions? Do you do your own remote recording?
I help out a little bit on engineering, but there's a gentleman named Kelly Donnelly that does almost all of it. I'll do a little assisting now and then.
The majority of what I know you as is your own artist career, as pretty much any artist who's focusing on their thing. But you've done a lot of session work. There's a lot of people listening who are getting into session work or have been doing it for a while. Is there any general principles, practical tips, or things that you can say to people who want to advance their session playing? Like you've talked a lot about serving the song and playing what's appropriate. What are some general principles that you like to give advice to young players about?
Well, I think it's kind of what you started to say. I mean, the most important thing is if you're doing a session thing for someone, you just gotta, okay, I'm gonna play on this record. What can I do to help paint more 3D or dynamics or interest or emotion? What can I contribute that will in some way enhance this song? I think that's it. It's as simple as that. And then there's all sorts of different levels of, sometimes people, if they ask me to do it on a play, they say, well, we really want you to blow up on this part. Or they say, can you just add some rhythm to this or whatever? But if they want to feature me in part of it, then I'll figure out a way to do that. But I don't want to overtake song. And I want to make sure that anything I play is enhancing the song, that in my opinion is making the song better or more interesting to listen to. I think if that's the main focus, then you're entering that thing right. If you're just looking at it as an opportunity to use for your own advantage, then rarely that will turn out as well. And I think I enjoy playing on other people's stuff for that reason, though, because it kind of puts me in a situation where I have to be a little bit anonymous. Or I like to approach it like an anonymous person, but what can I do to orchestrate or help this thing go somewhere?
So how do you know for yourself when to inject your voice versus just guitar for the song? Or are you even thinking about that? Because some people are going to ask you to play, they want to feature Eric Johnson on a track and they want it to sound like Eric Johnson. Then there's certain times where it's just like, they need guitar.
Well, if it's just they need guitar, then I just try to think of what's in the parameters of helping the song and not detracting or imbalancing the song. If they want to feature me, then I try to do it in a way that sounds really cool and it doesn't take away from the song or you know what I mean? Like there'll be one section where I'll do my thing, but then I don't talk too much. If somebody wants you to say something, make it count, but don't say too much, I guess,
I dig that. Shifting gears a little bit. Gears, pun intended. You have several signature guitars. You have a signature Martin MC40. You've got the Eric Johnson signature Fender Strat, the Eric Johnson signature Strat Rosewood, and more recently a thin line Strat. How does that feel? What is it like to have your own signature instruments? And what goes into developing signature instruments? How do you decide what you're going to do for that?
And I have a new one coming that just came out, the Virginia.
The Virginia? What's the Virginia?
Oh, that's this new one that just came out.
Tell me about it. Well, what goes, I still stand by my question. What goes into developing, now you have 4 signature Strats. That's insane. What goes into developing those for you? And what is that process like? Is that just as enjoyable for you as creating music? Or is it like a big pain because you're trying to figure out how to make this thing with a sound and a feel and a price point?
Yeah. Well, I think it's been a journey. I mean, the first Strats I put out, and I still think they're really nice guitars, but it's almost like every year, you're trying to develop a new model that maybe will enhance the music a little more. So the particular brand new one that's coming out is out. There's a edition with Fender called the Stories guitars, where they're basically taking artists that have certain guitars that were in their career that were really important to them. And I had one called Virginia. It was a 54 Strat that had all these different appointments that weren't original to 54, but it was still a 54 Strat that had customized things done to it. So we've just issued a version of that. I mean, it's like taking the first or second take of a song. You really get the magic, And I think Leo, when he made the Strat in '54 and '55, those first, second takes were magic. Having said that, there's certain things to me that could be adjusted to obviously to play more different types of music. So I tried to go with that first or second take of it's a great guitar, the type of wood, the way the wood's cut, the neck size. But then to me, you just have a stronger bridge pickup. The bridge pickup's always weak on the Strat.
Totally. I'm with you on that. My fortunate thing for me, I'm a Strat guy too. The fortunate thing that I have fallen into since I was a kid is I love an instrument with 22 frets. And what does that do? It negates me being able to buy vintage guitars, which actually is a good thing for me. It saves me a lot of money.
Well, the old Gibsons have 22 frets.
Yeah, but I'm a Strat guy.
Okay.
Yeah. I have a couple just quick fire things I want to ask to finish off because it's kind of a fun thing. Because as guitar players, we all love gear. We love to just know what gear is cool, whatever. Quick rapid fire questions. Any purchase, call it $20 or less. What does every guitar player need?
$20 or less. Wow.
$20-ish or less.
$20-ish or less. A groovy looking coil cord.
Oh, a coil cord.
Coil cord. So you can look like, Hendrix in the studio.
I dig it. Okay, cool. I've never heard that one. I like that. Is there a particular, some guys are like, man, this exact cable is how I get my sound. Other guys are like, I don't know what it could be Radio Shack. It could be Mogami. It could be this guy in the Himalayas that builds it or whatever. Do you have a specific cable that you're like, I got to use these?
I like George L cable.
Soldered or solderless?
Solderless.
Okay, cool. Purchase $100-ish, couple $100-ish if you have to go there, or less. Let's call it couple $100 or less, because that kind of gives you most pedal options if you wanted a pedal. It doesn't have to be a pedal. I don't want to skew your answer. Couple $100 or less.
Geez, that's a good question. What would I buy? A couple $100 or
what does every guitar player need?
Well, I don't know. Picks and strings, I guess. $200, you could buy a bunch of picks and strings, I guess.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I like that. Last question. Price is not an issue. What's the one piece of gear that everybody needs? There's no issue on price.
Wow. Everybody needs probably an old Plexi Marshall, maybe. It depends on the kind of music you're doing. But,
okay.
I mean, if you're playing rock, yeah. If you got the money, go out and find an old Marshall head.
Why a Plexi rather than a JCM 900 or whatever?
Well, those are cool sounding amps too. Yeah, it's just a different sound.
Okay. I've actually never owned a Marshall amp. So here I am hosting this guitar podcast and I've never owned a Marshall. It's shameful. I know.
No, that's cool. That's probably kind of cool. I remember I used to even when I was, first starting out and playing Clapton stuff and all, I just played a twin reverb with a 335 and I just cranked it up and
yeah.
And it was later on that I actually got into Marshall, but they're the copies of Tweed Fenders. So
sure.
I guess you could go out and find a Tweed Bassman and be the same thing.
Well, you did say a Plexi Marshall. That was your first answer. So I like to know that though. That's cool. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today. It's been really a joy to talk with you. Hopefully we'll get a chance to share the stage or hang out and play guitars together sometime.
That would be great, man. I'll look forward to that. And it's nice meeting you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much. Appreciate it. All right. There you have it. Eric Johnson. Dude's chill. I like that cat. Tell you what, after this interview, I went back and I listened to a bunch of his catalog. It was interesting to hear exactly what he was talking about through his discography, starting from more guitar-centric stuff to more storytelling and using the guitar as a vehicle to tell those stories. That's pretty cool. I'm inspired. Thanks for joining us today. We'll be back next week. Hang out with us. Peace!